There are estimated to be 87,000 Americans waiting for a kidney transplant, but only 17,000 get them each year. On June 16, 2010, 2 men in dire need of a kidney transplant got their wish. They were each recipients of this very important organ from a donor who had died from a stroke. The transplant ended many years of blood cleansing dialysis and gave them back the gift of a normal life.
Welcome to The Better Part, a program that encompasses a diverse spectrum of topics important to our community, which we hope will both inform and entertain you. We invite you to sit back and enjoy the program.
Two local men traveled to UC Davis Hospital, located in downtown Sacramento, to receive a very special gift, a much-needed kidney. Both men received their gift of a lifetime within 6 hours of each other. Dr. Richard Perez performed the delicate surgery. The recipients were Mr. Paul Adams, a former trucking businessman from Salinas, and Dr. Brad Paini, a practicing dentist from Dublin. And they're both here with me to share their experiences. And later, I'll also talk with Brad's mother and sister. I'm Val Jeffrey. Welcome, Brad.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Welcome, Paul.
Thank you.
So, Brad, let's start with you. Kidney problems mostly don't have any symptoms. So I'm making the assumption that you might have been being checked out because your mother had a kidney problem. Or how did you find out about the problem?
My mom had a kidney transplant when I was just in high school, and it was at that time that they said, we should check you out a little bit further. And so I was 17 years old, got into the doctor's office, and at that time they didn't have MRIs and things like that. They had nuclear medicine. So he shot me full of this nuclear medicine, checked my kidneys out, and so at 17 he says, you've got the same disease your mom has. So at some point I knew I would have to face the music and have to get a kidney transplant, just like I saw my mom going through.
Were you scared when you found that out?
No, but it's always debilitating. You always think that there's something wrong with you.
But then you needed dialysis. So can you explain a little bit how dialysis works so that our viewers can understand?
In the progression of this disease, you go through all kinds of things. And at the end, when your kidneys are finally failing, there's a point where you just don't have any energy. You come home in the car and you just sleep in the car. You don't even make it inside the house. And there's just no energy. And you fall asleep, you sleep very well all the time, constantly tired. And so at some point, the doctor will tell you, he says, you need to start dialysis at this point. Your kidneys have failed, it's time. And you're reluctant and you don't want to do it. And you stall and you think, why me? And all those things go through your head. And then eventually you accept it. And you go and you get your surgeries done and they hook you up to this machine. And it's a complete change of life all of a sudden because this machine rules your life. It dominates the time that you have, your free time, everything. And initially you feel better. And it's just like a dial on a clock radio or something. You can just turn it up and that's where your energy level is. Suddenly you're on dialysis and you start to feel better. And so it's a great machine. But it requires time to replace that function of your kidney, and it's a weak replacement, a very weak replacement. You're on there for 9.5 hours a night just to maintain a survival.
And how long did you have to do that for?
Every night.
Every night?
Every night of the week, 9.5 hours a night.
But how many weeks before you got, what was the time span that you had to do that 9 hours?
Well, we, both Paul and I, we did it for different lengths of time, but I was on it for 2.5 years. So for 2.5 years of your life, you're a slave to that machine. Mm. And so at one point you're glad to be on it and it keeps you alive and it's your friend. Yeah. And then at some point, you move on and you get the next step, which is the transplant. And you're very happy to see that machine go bye-bye. And it was very nice. Great change of lifestyle.
So Paul, how did you find out that you had a problem?
I just became sick, very anemic, itching, and nausea and things like that. I went to a physician, and they did blood tests and told me to go to the emergency room. And I had admitted to the hospital, and then they did some ultrasounds and discovered my kidney, wasn't working properly, and I went on emergency hemodialysis that next day, and just went from there.
Was that scary for you?
Oh yeah, very scary.
And did you both have the same kind of dialysis? You just mentioned a name, a specific kind of dialysis?
Yes, there's two types, hemodialysis and peritoneal dialysis. Hemodialysis is a direct, your blood gets cleansed through a machine that draws your blood out and cleanses the blood that way. Where peritoneal dialysis, you have a catheter in your stomach, and your peritoneal cavity is filled with the fluid, and it creates a chemical reaction to draw the bad
The poisons.
yeah, the poisons out of your body.
So what does it feel like when that's going through your body? Let's start with you, Brad.
Well, I've only done the peritoneal, which is where your belly gets filled up with fluid. And they put in, for me, anywhere from 2 liters to 3 liters. So if you think about one of those big, large 7-Up Pepsi 2-liter bottles, imagine shoving that up underneath your stomach. And sometimes more than that. And that's what you felt like. And you knew you had water in your fluid, and as a result, I was still jogging at the time, or at least I thought I was jogging, and it was a very slow jog, but it would rupture things. So all of a sudden, I had never been in the hospital before in my life, and I ended up having 3 hernias, 3 separate hernias in my body, because that fluid just distends your abdomen. And so there's certain things like that, but you knew you had that fluid in you when you were going through it.
How about you, Paul? Was it the same experience?
Well, for hemodialysis, it was very draining. You get home, and you're in a chair for I was in for 3 hours. All depends how your weight and how sick you are. But 3 hours sitting in a chair, just watching the other people, and it's very scary because some of them have been doing it for a long time, and they're very sick. Especially the people with diabetes, the loss of limbs, and things like that. But I was glad to get on peritoneal dialysis. But the fluid, and you really notice it, especially if the bags aren't warm enough.
So how long were you on the waiting list for the kidney?
A little over 5 years.
Right. And how about you, Brad?
Originally I was on. There's one thing, in America it's supposed to be a national transplant registry, whereas it's supposed to be the same amount of time. So if Paul and I got it in exactly the same time, we should have been transplanted at exactly the same time also. It's completely different. I was on at UC San Francisco at first, and for type A blood, which was my type, they said you'll wait 6 years. All of a sudden, Steve Jobs comes along for Apple Computer and goes back to Tennessee and gets a liver transplant within just a couple of weeks. And I said, there's something different about this National Transplant Registry. Different places, different facilities have different waiting times. So I started looking around, and I found that UC Davis, which is only 100 miles away from San Francisco, has a completely different waiting list, even though we're all supposedly on the same national list. And so for type A blood at UC Davis, the wait time was 3 years. So I said, let's take all my time from San Francisco and let's move it over to UC Davis. And that's what I did. And within just a matter of several months, I got my first phone call that we said, hey, we've got a potential donor for you. And anyway, you'll get several of those in the process. It didn't quite work out as well as I wanted it to, but within about 6 to 8 months, we were done. We had our transplant, and so it moved, but the time scale completely ahead of where I thought I was going to be, which was a relief.
So your donor, he died from a stroke. He had the forethought to donate his kidneys, and you got one each.
Correct.
Did you have them done? Did you have them done at the same time? Were you laying on beds next to each other? How does it work?
I was first.
Yes, he was. I thought I was first, honestly. I was there. I got a phone call right after work, 5 o'clock. And again, I'd been through this before. I'd been on the surgery table. I'd been there. They'd opened me up, the whole thing, and put the tubes down my throat. And I thought I was done in February, and this was June, and it didn't work out. And so I'd been through this whole thing before, and I thought, I'm not going to get too jacked up. But they, I got the call. I was up there. They had me prepped up. And I thought, okay, good. I'm first in line. And then about 10 o'clock in the evening, some guy rolls in, gets in the bed next to me, and it's like, who's this guy? And he's just flown in from Washington. And it happened to be Paul.
Yeah.
And they were talking to him like he was going to, all of a sudden, he just upstaged me. And they started giving him his anti-rejection medication ahead of me. And it's like, wait a second. And pretty soon I realized, he's number one. I'm number two. So, and it's like, all right, well, we'll just see how this surgeon is, because I'd never met the surgeon before either. And I thought, well, that's good. He can make, all his trouble and mistakes on Paul if he's good or not. I'll find out first. So anyway, so Paul went ahead and got transplanted. I believe it was about 4 o'clock in the morning.
Mm-hmm.
And then I followed him up about, I think it was 10 o'clock. Again, you're out for a while, so I have no idea exact time exchange on that. But I think it was about 10 o'clock the next morning. So I got the second kidney. Paul got the first one. So Paul likes to call us kidney cousins. So that, because we share the same DNA in one part of our body,
right,
we're kidney cousins now.
I think you should be kidney brothers. That sounds better.
There we go.
Yeah.
So I was surprised to find out that they usually leave your kidneys in and then they transplant the new kidney in. Did that happen for both of you? Is that how it worked, or did they remove your kidney?
Well, my one kidney was not functioning at all, and it was about the size of a raisin. And the other kidney, they left in. So, yeah, they didn't take out any.
How about you?
Yeah, and for me, I've got all three still.
Okay.
They're all in there.
All three?
And the surgeon offered. He says, you've got one bad kidney that's leaking some blood right now. He says, you want me to take it out? And I says, okay. I said, well, you put the new one in that spot. And he says, no. He says, we're still going to put it up here in the front where we can work easier. And it's like, well, you know what? Let's just get feeling better first. Let's put the new one in, and then we'll talk about taking the old ones out later. So that's where I'm at. So I've still got 3 kidneys.
Yeah. So did the donor kidneys start working for you both at the same time? If the operation was 6 hours between, is that when they started to kick in? How did that work?
Well, Paul can answer
Go,
that.
Paul.
Well, we both had what they called sleepy kidneys. It took a while for them to kick in. They were just kind of in limbo, until they started, getting the fluids that we needed and things like that. So it took about
almost 5-6 days.
Yeah, 5-6 days before they were fully.
A scary time for your wives, probably more than you. You were probably heavily sedated.
No. We were up and walking.
Wow.
We'd race around the ward.
They make you walk the first day when but you're not feeling good. Again, you got all that poison in your system, and now they've pumped you full of fluid. So we look like the Michelin Man. All our fingers were distended, our faces were full of fluid, and nothing coming out the other end yet. No urine production.
Yeah.
And so you're feeling lousy, and the doctors are very calm with the situation. They said, we're fine, we're going to discharge you after about a week. I went home, and I finally called them up. I said, you know what, something's wrong. I've got to start dialyzing again. I don't feel good. I'm throwing up. Nothing's working here. Even though I've got this new kidney, it's not happening. And they said, hold on. They said, we just got your blood work back. It's just starting to inch down. Your poison level, your creatinine level is just starting to inch down a little bit. They said, hang in there, it's going to work. And so sure enough, I called Paul up, and he says, I got my blood work back about 6 hours ago or the day before, and his had started kicking in. So it's like, okay, so I know if his works, because he had the first surgery, mine is probably right behind it. And sure enough, and then they started working.
And that's how it worked.
Yeah.
And then within a couple days, we were urinating, good urine, and boy, the energy level, again, it was just like jacking that light switch up. It was just tremendous. As soon as you started urinating, getting the poisons out of your system, you felt great. It was just night and day. And then it was just a matter of time before you were just virtually back to normal again.
Do you have to worry about rejection now? Is there a chance that they could suddenly reject?
I don't know, Paul.
Yeah, there's a chance, but as long as you're compliant with your medications, you know, I don't think.
Yeah. So medicine and diet. So
Diet, no.
No? Okay.
Well, I mean, you know,
Exercise.
you have to, yeah, with the exercise, but diet, you know, on dialysis, you have such a restricted diet, you know, just a high protein, you know, no dairy, no cheeses, you know, everything with high phosphorus levels just is harder on your body. But the proteins like meat and fish and eggs are high in phosphorus, but also the highest level of protein that you need, you know, just to keep your strength up.
Yeah.
So,
well, eating healthy is good for all of us anyway,
Oh,
isn't
yeah.
it? So,
Yeah.
is there anything that you can't do? Or you mustn't do, let's say?
they say contact sports kind of help.
Yeah.
Yeah, just to go back to your rejection question for a second, you know, I was curious also, and I asked the physician within I think it was a couple of weeks later, I said, by the way, I go, how good a match was that kidney with my body? Mm-hmm. And he says, well, let me look it up. And so he looks up on the computer screen and he says, you matched 1 out of 6 factors. I think it was 1 or 2 out of 6.
That doesn't sound good.
I was surprised because I knew we had the blood type. I mean, we had to have the same blood type, but I think it was just 1 factor out of 6. He says, you matched 1 out of 6. And it's like, well, what's that going to do as far as longevity or rejection? And he says, don't worry. He says, the medications now are strong enough. He says, we can overcome that. And I said, what's the prognosis? How long will this last then? And he says, if you take your medication, your anti-rejection medications properly, he says, this thing should go at least 10 years. He says, if it goes any less than that, he says, I would question how you're taking your medication. You must be skipping days or forgetting to take your meds. So I said, okay, that's, 10 years is good enough for me right now. I feel pretty good. I'll take it. So yeah. I don't think there's the medication is not the problem anymore. The rejection is not an issue.
It's wonderful. It really is, isn't it?
It's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep.
So, if someone right now finds out they're in need of a transplant, can you just give us a quick shopping list of the process? What happens when? Just quickly.
I think the first thing you've got to decide is what kind of dialysis you want to do. If you want to do the hemodialysis, where, like Paul said, you're sitting in a chair,
right,
hooked up to a machine where your blood's going through a machine for 3, 4, 5 hours, several times a week. Or if you want to try and do the peritoneal, where you're a little bit more mobile and you can do it at home, and that's what we both ended up doing.
Right. And you did have the choice, did you?
Oh, yeah.
Sure.
Yes. Okay.
So that's your first decision. And,
decision.
Like Paul says, the diet is completely different on the 2 types of dialysis. So you decide that first. Second thing, you've got to decide where you're going to have your transplant done. Like I said, that makes a world of difference as to how long this process takes. And the longer you're on that dialysis machine, the worse your body gets. That thing just racks you. And so you'll see, you're emaciated, you're just a shell of yourself by the time you get that transplant. You need a transplant.
Yeah. Well, you really have a new life, and you're happy, and you can now do things that you couldn't do before. And what did you actually look forward to doing that you couldn't do?
Oh, well, Paul and I, we talked about this. When we first got out of that hospital, the diet's the first thing that you notice. And so for me, I wanted a pizza and a beer. Both of those things are off the list. You can't have dairy products because of the calcium. It's not filtered real well through your dialysis machine. And then the second thing is beer. It has too much phosphorus in it, which makes you itch. And so you couldn't have that. So that was my craving. Paul, it was a little different. He wanted
chili
ice cream.
cheese dog and a chocolate malt.
I don't know what I would choose.
So after the diet, that was their first thing. We had to get that. And then it's the energy takes over. And then you said, oh my gosh, now I can hike again. I can run. I can ski. I can do all kinds of different things that I couldn't do when I was hooked up to that machine. You just didn't have the energy.
Yeah.
So that for me was the biggest thing. It's just that energy surge.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Well, good luck to you both going forward.
Thank you.
And I'm so happy for you both. 2 brothers here together with sharing a kidney each from the same donor, wonderful donor. I'm going to be talking with Brad's mother and with Brad's sister, so I will be right back. I've been joined by Barbara Paini and her daughter Elaine. Elaine graduated from San Jose State with a nursing degree and specializes in kidney dialysis treatment. Mm-hmm. And Barbara received a donor kidney more than 35 years ago. That must be some record. So what's your secret for success?
I just watch my diet, low salt, low protein, and I have a husband who's very supportive, and alcohol, very little. Once in a while, a glass of wine.
Well, that's medicinal.
Yes.
Was your kidney failure hereditary?
Yes, it was. My father died at 43. And of course, back then there was no transplants or medications. But yes, and in his family, out of 8 kids, 4 of them died before they were 50.
When did you realize you had a problem?
Well, I knew as time went on, it was obvious. I had inherited his weakness.
So how long were you on dialysis?
I was only on about 4 or 5 months. Ernie was my assistant in dialyzing me, and we did it at home.
Did everything go smoothly for you when you had the new kidney?
Oh, it was. There were times when it didn't go too well, you know, when urinating and things like that. But eventually, your system works over it, and yes, it did work. I think every day of that donor. Thank God.
Yes.
For him.
Yeah. As a mother, when you found out that Brad had a problem, you knew what he had to go through.
Yes.
How did you feel?
Guilty, I guess, to a certain extent. He has a younger brother who's going to be going through the same thing, our youngest son. You feel it's nothing you can control.
Yeah.
And had I known early on in our marriage, I probably would have adopted children.
Well, you have 3 wonderful children.
I do.
So
I'm
it's
very
just
lucky.
As well you didn't think through that quite long enough, okay?
Yeah. No, I'm very fortunate.
Yeah.
I have 3 college graduate students, and I was able to work to help, which I've been very grateful to that donor.
Yeah. So, Elaine, are you tested regularly to ensure that your kidneys are okay, and have you had any problems?
I'm tested all the time. I watch my blood pressure, I watch what I eat, I exercise. Have I had any problems? No, not yet, knock on wood.
Yeah.
So.
Did you decide to be a kidney dialysis nurse because of your mum's transplant?
Yeah, they had a lot to do with it. I used to watch them obviously dialyze at home. I was taking care of my little brother at the time, and when I was going through nursing school, I went to Stanford and watched several of the nurses do training and kind of followed them around. They were the hot shot nurses. It was a hot shot program, and in fact, since then, the person who started the whole sort of independent program for dialysis, I still work for him, Dr. Norman Copeland. And he sort of was innovative in bringing dialysis out of the hospital and out into the community.
Do you ever worry that you may get a kidney problem?
Sure, I worry, yeah. Not necessarily maybe the polycystic, but any person can develop kidney problems. It's being, again, proactive about your health and making sure you see the doctor on time. Having your blood pressures checked. We have quite a few people that have high blood pressure. Diabetes, like Paul is mentioning, is very predominant. So the more you keep things under control and keep an eye on it and take good care of yourself, I think that's the name of the whole game.
Yeah, well, that's a good thing to say to everybody. And Barbara, 35 years, that's a wonderful record.
I know, I'm so fortunate.
Yes, and thanks to the donors that actually say that their kidneys can be taken, because without them, we wouldn't be here, right?
Nope.
No.
Nope.
Yeah, well, thank you both very much. And to close the program, what I'd like to do is have Paul and Brad come back and their wives, also Karen and Denise. We'll be right back. Welcome back. This is a family affair. We've been joined by Denise, Paul's wife, and Karen, Brad's wife. And do any of you know anything about your donor?
Brad and myself, our donor was a 48-year-old male, died of a stroke, we believe. That's pretty much all we know at this point.
We're not sure, but there was a young man in the time period that was necessary. It was killed in a motorcycle accident, a Marine down in Camp Pendleton, a young man who I think of every day, and his family.
Did you ever think that you wouldn't get a kidney and give up hope? Brad?
No, I just knew it was part of the cycle. I'd seen my mom go through it, and all the doctors assured me that if you just wait long enough, you would be there. But there were times when you felt pretty sick that you thought, I may not make it to that point.
Paul, how about you?
I always kept the faith in getting a kidney. There's ups and downs in being sick like that, but I always kept the faith.
We hope that you've enjoyed the program, and if there's anyone out there that is even thinking about checking that box on the donor card on your driving license, please go ahead and do it. These people are alive today because somebody had the forethought to say, I'm going to give my kidneys, I'm going to give my organs. So, hope you've enjoyed this edition of The Better Part. Thank you for watching.
Oh Lord my God, when I in awesome wonder consider all the worlds thy hands have made, I see the stars, I hear the rolling thunder, thy power throughout the universe displayed. Then sings